Hello everyone, welcome to today's live session. Today we are going to revise the French Revolution and the idea of nation from history, first chapter of history. First clear expression of nationalism came with the French Revolution in 1789. The French Revolution and the idea of the nation. Birth of nationalism in France, 1789. The first clear expression of nationalism came with the French Revolution in 1789. Before the revolution, France was a fully fledged territorial state under an absolute monarch. The political and constitutional changes of the revolution led to the transfer of sovereignty from the monarchy to a body of French citizens. The revolution declared that the people constitute the nation, the people shape its destiny. Measures taken to create national unity. The French revolutionaries introduced several measures to create a collective identity among French people. Some new ideas were la patrie, that is fatherland, love for the nation, and les citoyens, that means citizen, equal citizens with equal rights. These ideas emphasized a united community, equal rights, and rule under a constitution. Yes. National symbols and institutions. The tricolor French national flag replaced the royal flag. The States General was elected by active citizens, renamed the National Assembly. A State General was renamed as the National Assembly, and also the royal flag was replaced by the tricolor French national flag. And third point is national culture. That is, new national hymns were composed, oaths were taken, and martyrs were commemorated. All these were done in the name of the nation. So, in the national culture, national hymns were composed, oaths were taken, and martyrs were commemorated. Administrative reforms. A centralized administrative system was established. It formulated uniform laws for all citizens, ensured equal administration throughout France. Economic reforms. Internal custom duties were abolished. A uniform system of weights and measures was introduced. In linguistic unity, regional dialects were discouraged. French, as spoken and written in Paris, became the common national language. French Revolution and Europe. The revolutionaries believed it was the mission of France, the destiny of French nation, to liberate the peoples of Europe from despotism, that is absolute rule, and help them become nations. Ultra short NCRT exam points. 1789. The first clear expression of nationalism came. Sovereignty transferred from monarchy to citizens. Le patrie, fatherland, and le citoyen, citizen. Tricolor replaced royal standard. Estates General was renamed as National Assembly. New hymns, oaths, and martyrs were taken. Centralized administration and uniform laws were taken. Internal custom duties were abolished. Uniform weights and measures introduced. In Paris, French became the national language, and France aimed to free Europe from despotism and spread nationalism. The first clear expression of nationalism came with the French Revolution in 1789. France, as you will remember, was a full-fledged territorial state in 1789 under the rule of an absolute monarch. The political and constitutional changes that came in the wake of the French Revolution led to the transfer of sovereignty from the monarchy to a body of French citizens. The revolution proclaimed that it was the people who would henceforth constitute the nation and shape its destiny. From the very beginning, the French revolutionaries introduced various measures and practices that could create a sense of collective identity amongst the French people. The ideas of le patrie, the fatherland, the le citoyen, the citizen, emphasized the notion of a united community enjoying equal rights under a constitution. A new French flag, the tricolor, was chosen to replace the formal royal standard. The Estates General was elected by a body of active citizens, renamed the National Assembly. New hymns were composed, oaths were taken, martyrs were commemorated, all in the name of nation. A centralized administrative system was put in place, and it formulated uniform laws for all citizens within its territory. Internal custom duties and dues were abolished, and a uniform system of weights and measures were adopted. Regional dialects was discouraged, and French, as it was spoken and written in Paris, became the common language of the nation. Now, the revolutionaries further declared that it was the mission and the destiny of the French nation to liberate the peoples of Europe from despotism, in other words, to help other peoples of Europe to become nations. When the news of the events in France reached the cities of Europe, students and other members of educated class began setting up Jacobin clubs. Their activities and campaigns prepared the way for the French armies which moved into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland and much of Italy in 1790s. With the outbreak of revolutionary wars, the French armies began to carry the idea of nationalism abroad. Steps taken by French revolutionaries to create national unity. Introduced the idea of Le Patrie and Le Citoyen, adopted the tricolor flag, renamed Estates General as National Assembly, composed national hymns, took oaths and commemorated martyrs, established a centralized administration with uniform laws, abolished internal customs duties and introduced uniform weights and measures, promoted French language as the common national language. Remember these 7 points and you can answer almost every Cbse question from this section. The first clear expression of nationalism in Europe came with the French Revolution in 1789. The French Revolution transferred sovereignty from monarchy to a body of French citizens. Sovereignty was transferred from the monarchy to a body of French citizens. Which of the following means fatherland? Fatherland means le patrie. Le citoyen means the citizen. Le patrie, fatherland symbolizing love and devotion to the nation. The term le citoyen means citizen. Le citoyen is equal to citizen, emphasizing equal rights and participation in the nation. Which flag replaced the royal standard during the French Revolution? Tricolor flag. The tricolor became the national flag and replaced the royal standard. The States General was renamed as the National Assembly. The State General elected by the active citizens was renamed the National Assembly. Which of the following was introduced to ensure administrative uniformity throughout the France? Centralized administrative system. A centralized administrative system was established to formulate uniform laws and ensure equal administration throughout France. Which economic reform helped create national unity in France? Increase in internal custom duties, no. Introduction of different currencies, yes. Abolition of internal customs duties. Ban on trade between regions. Which economic reform helped create national unity in France? Introduction of different currencies, no. Only one or two currencies were made to be introduced. Abolition of internal customs duties. Hope so. Yes. Internal customs duties were abolished, making trade easier and strengthening economic unity within France. A uniform system of weights and measures was introduced to increase regional differences, no promote trade and administrative uniformity, no strengthen the monarchy, reduce agricultural production, promote trade and administrative uniformity. Yes. A uniform system of weights and measures helped remove confusion, promoted trade and ensured uniformity across France. Which language was promoted as the common national language of France? French. French as spoken and written in Paris was promoted as the common national language while regional dialects were discouraged. The idea of la patrie and les citoyens emphasized rule of monarchy and privileges, regional identities, united community with equal rights under a constitution, religious supremacy. United community with equal rights under a constitution. Hope so. Yes, la patrie, fatherland, and les citoyen, citizen, emphasized a united community enjoying equal rights under a constitution. The French revolutionaries believed it was the mission and destiny of France to conquer all of Europe for economic gain, spread monarchy across Europe, liberate the peoples of Europe from despotism, establish French colonies everywhere. Liberate the peoples of Europe from despotism. The French revolutionaries believed it was the mission and destiny of France to liberate the peoples of Europe from despotism, absolute rule, and help them become nations. Which of the following was not a step taken by French revolutionaries to create national unity? Composing national hymns, that was a step taken by them. Taking oaths in the name of the nation, that was also taken by them. Encouraging regional dialects as official languages, no. Regional dialects were discouraged and the French was made the official language. So it is the wrong statement. C is wrong. Commemorating martyrs, yes, commemorated martyrs in the name of unifying the nation. C. Regional dialects were discouraged and French as spoken and written in Paris was promoted as the common national language. The political and constitutional changes brought by the French Revolution led to transfer of sovereignty from monarchy to citizens. The French Revolution led to the transfer of sovereignty from the monarchy to a body of French citizens, who according to the French Revolution constituted the nation and shaped its destiny. The people. According to the French Revolution, the people constituted the nation. The people shaped its destiny. This was a revolutionary idea because sovereignty no longer belonged to the king but to the citizens. Which of the following symbols became an expression of the nation during the French Revolution? National hymns, oaths, commemoration of martyrs, all the above. The abolition of internal customs duties mainly helped in increasing regional barriers, promoting economic unity within France, strengthening feudalism, reducing trade. Promoting economic unity within France. Yes. The abolition of internal custom duties removed trade barriers within France and promoted economic unity. The revolutionaries wanted all citizens to enjoy equal rights under a constitution. The ideas of La Patrie and Les Citoyens emphasized that citizens should enjoy equal rights under a constitution. Which statement best reflects the idea of nationalism introduced by the French Revolution? The king alone is the nation. The church should control the state. The people constitute the nation and shape its destiny. Nobles have greater rights than common citizens. Which statement best reflects the idea of nationalism introduced by the French Revolution? The people constitute the nation and shape its destiny. Which one of the following measures was taken by French revolutionaries to create a collective identity among the French people? Promotion of regional dialects, introduction of internal custom duties, adoption of the tricolor flag, restoration of the feudal privileges. Adoption of the tricolor flag. Promotion of regional dialects. No, regional dialects were not promoted. Regional dialects means regional languages. Regional languages were not promoted. Rather than French was made a common language, that is French was made or French was promoted. And introduction of internal custom duties. Internal customs duties were already there. It was abolished. Adoption of the tricolor flag instead of the royal flag was a measure taken, and restoration of the feudal privileges. No, feudal privileges were not restored. So C will be the answer. The tricolor flag was adopted as a national symbol and replaced the royal standard, helping create a collective identity among French citizens. What was the main purpose of renaming the Estates General as the National Assembly? To strengthen the monarchy, to represent the nation and its citizens, to increase noble privileges, to support regional identities. To represent the nation and its citizens. The Estates General was renamed the National Assembly because it was meant to represent the nation and its citizens, not the privileged estates. Which of the following was introduced by the revolutionaries to remove regional differences in trade? Which of the following was introduced by the revolutionaries to remove regional differences in trade? Different currencies in each region? No. That was earlier there was different currencies in each region, then it was reduced to one or two currencies. Uniform system of weights and measures. Yes, that will be the most probable answer. More internal custom barriers. Internal custom barriers were reduced. Separate laws for each province. There was common law for every province. So I think B will be the answer. The uniform system of weights and measures removed confusion and regional differences, making trade easier throughout France. Which of the following was discouraged by the French revolutionaries? Which of the following was discouraged by the French revolutionaries? National hymns, French language, regional dialects, National Assembly. Regional dialects was discouraged. Rather, French was encouraged. The French revolutionaries discouraged regional dialects and promoted French as spoken and written in Paris as the common national language. The ideas of Les Patrie and Les Citoyens represented the notion of the united community enjoying equal rights. Which statement is correct? France remained an absolute monarchy after 1789. Sovereignty continued to belong to the king after the revolution. No, it belonged to the people. The revolution declared that the people constituted the nation. That is correct. The revolution strengthened the feudal privileges. No, the revolution weakened the feudal privileges. See. The French Revolution declared that the people constituted the nation and sovereignty belonged to the citizens rather than the king. The concept of la patrie refers to fatherland. La patria, fatherland, symbolizing the nation to which citizens owe their loyalty and devotion, who were elected by active citizens and renamed as the National Assembly. Estate General. Estate General was renamed as National Assembly. The French revolutionaries saw it as their mission to spread monarchy across Europe, liberate the peoples of Europe from despotism, establish French colonies in Europe, promote feudal privileges, liberate the peoples of Europe from despotism. What is despotism? Despotism is a system of government in which one ruler holds absolute power and exercises it without meaningful limits from laws, institutions, or the people. Key features often include concentrated authority in one person or small group, limited political freedoms, weak or absent checks and balances, rule enforced through coercion, fear, or military power. Related terms: autocracy, ruled by one person; dictatorship, authoritarian rule, often modern and political; absolute monarchy, monarchy with unrestricted royal authority. In political philosophy, despotism is usually contrasted with or is the opposite of democracy, constitutional government, and the rule by law. Which of the following was a consequence of the French Revolution? Sovereignty remained with the monarchy. No, sovereignty was transferred from monarchy to the hands of people. Uniform laws were abolished. No, uniform laws were introduced. Citizens became the source of sovereignty. Yes, that is the right answer. Regional dialects become official language. No, regional dialects were discouraged and French became the official language. So B. Oh, citizen became the source of sovereignty. Simple mistakes. Simple mistake. Why? The French Revolution transferred sovereignty from the monarchy to the citizen, declared that the people constitute the nation, made citizen the source of political power. Which one of the following was introduced to ensure that all citizens were governed by the same laws? Central Administrative System. The central administrative system was established to ensure that all citizens were governed by the same uniform laws throughout France. What replaced the royal standard in France? Tricolor flag. Which of the following was introduced to create a collective identity among the French people? New hymns, oaths, and commemoration of martyrs. New hymns, oaths, and commemoration of martyrs were introduced to create a collective identity and a sense of belonging among French citizens. Which statement about the French Revolution is not correct? It promoted the idea of a united nation. That is correct. It abolished internal custom duties. That is also correct. It encouraged regional dialects as official languages. No, it discouraged regional dialects as official language and they made French as their official language. It introduced uniform weights and measures. So not correct is it encouraged regional dialects as official languages. It promoted French as spoken and written in Paris as the common national language. Which idea was at the core of French nationalism? Sovereignty of the people. The core idea of French nationalism was sovereignty of the people. Before 1789, sovereignty belonged to the king. After the revolution, sovereignty belonged to the nation, the people. The French Revolution proclaimed that king constitutes the nation, nobles constitute the nation, people constitute the nation, shape its destiny, the church constitute the nation. C. The people constitute the nation. The French Revolution proclaimed that people constitute the nation and change its destiny. Why did the French revolutionaries abolish internal custom duties? To increase regional differences, to promote economic unity and free movement of goods, to strengthen feudalism, to reduce national unity. To promote economic unity and free movement of goods. B. Yes. Which of the following pairs is correctly matched? La Patrie, citizen. No, La Patrie, fatherland. Les citoyens, citizen. La Patrie, fatherland. National Assembly, royal standard. National Assembly was... No, La Patrie, fatherland is the correct option. Other important pairs: Les citoyens, citizen. Tricolor, national flag. Estate General, National Assembly. Okay, Estate General was converted to National Assembly. Which of the following measures helped create a sense of national unity through culture? Uniform weights and measures? Yes. National hymns, oaths and commemoration of martyrs? Yes. Abolition of monarchy alone? No. Internal custom duties? No. Which of the following measures helped create a sense of national unity through culture? Through culture, the right option will be national hymns, oaths, commemoration of martyrs. National hymns, oaths, and commemoration of martyrs helped create a sense of national unity through culture and shared emotions. Which of the following was not an economic measure introduced by the French revolutionaries? Abolition of internal customs duties, uniform system of weights and measures, centralized administration. Is not an economic measure. Abolition of internal custom duties, uniform system of weights and measures, centralized administration. I think the answer will be C, centralized administration. Yes, centralized administration was an administrative measure, not an economic one. Economic measures: abolition of internal custom duties, uniform systems of weights and measures. Administrative measure: central administrative system. The combination of measures was introduced to create a collective identity among the French people. Tricolor flag, yes. National Assembly, yes. Uniform laws, yes. Common national language, yes. 1, 2, 3 and 4. D. You got only MCQ 29 wrong. That's excellent revision. Thank you. MCQ 41. The French Revolution promoted the idea of a nation based on citizens rather than a monarch. The revolution transferred sovereignty from the monarchy to a body of French citizens. First assertion is true. The French Revolution promoted the idea of a nation based on citizen rather than the monarch. They doesn't give importance to king, they give importance to the citizens. The revolution transferred sovereignty from the monarchy to a body of French citizens. That is also true. R is the correct explanation of A. So A will be the right answer. Correct. Both A and R are true, and R is the correct explanation of A. Assertion: the French Revolution promoted the idea of a nation based on citizens rather than a monarch. And so sovereignty was transferred from the monarchy to a body of French citizens. The reason directly explains why nationalism became centered on citizens instead of the king. Which one of the following was introduced after the French Revolution to strengthen national identity? Promotion of regional dialects, uniform laws for all citizens, different weights and measures in different region. No, uniform weights and measures in different region. Internal custom areas were abolished. Promotion of regional dialects. No, discourage of or abolition of regional dialects. Uniform laws for all citizens is the right answer. Uniform laws helped strengthen national unity because all citizens were governed by the same legal system. Which of the following best explains the meaning of nation state? A state ruled by king? No. A state where people share a common identity, sovereignty belongs to the nation? Yes. A state controlled by the church? A state made up of several colonies? B. A nation state is a state where people share a common identity, history, culture, or aspirations. A nation, people, not the king, is the source of sovereignty. Citizens feel a sense of belonging to one nation. The idea emerged strongly after the French Revolution. The French Revolution declared that sovereignty belongs to the nation. Before 1789, sovereignty lies in the hand of kings. But after French Revolution, sovereignty belongs to nation or people. The revolution declared people constitute the nation and shape its destiny, not the monarch. The ideas of Le Patrie and Les Citoyens were meant to emphasize a united community enjoying equal rights under a constitution. Explanation. The ideas of Le Patrie, fatherland, Les Citoyens, citizen, emphasized national unity, equal rights for all citizens, loyalty to the nation rather than the king, government based on a constitution. Which one of the following was not introduced by French revolutionaries to create a sense of national unity? Tricolor flag, uniform system of weights and measures, internal custom duties, National Assembly. Internal custom duties were abolished. Why the French revolutionaries abolished internal custom duties? They did not introduce them. Measures introduced for national unity. Tricolor flag, National Assembly, uniform system of weights and measures, common national language, uniform laws, national hymns, oaths and martyrs. Which of the following was the most revolutionary principle introduced by the French Revolution? Uniform weights and measures, French as the national language, the people constitute the nation and are the source of sovereignty, adoption of the tricolor flag. Most revolutionary principle will be the people constituting the nation and the source, and they are the source of sovereignty. Why is this the most revolutionary principle? Because it completely changed the basis of political power. Before the revolution, king is the source of sovereignty, subjects obeyed the monarch, that is, people obeyed the monarch. But after the revolution, people became the nation, citizens are the source of sovereignty. Government derives authority from the nation. All other measures, that is tricolor, language, hymns, uniform laws, weights and measures were important, but they were meant to support this central principle. Which of the following correctly matches the measure with its purpose? Tricolor flag, strengthen regional identities. Yeah, maybe. Uniform laws, different laws for different provinces. No. Uniform laws means uniform laws for different provinces. Common national language, create a collective identity. That is true. Internal custom duties, promote economic unity. No, internal custom duties were abolished. And tricolor flag, strengthen regional identities. No, it does not strengthen regional identities, rather it strengthens national identity. So the correct answer will be common national language, create a collective identity. tricolor flag, national symbol of unity, uniform laws, same laws for all citizens, common national language, create a collective identity, abolition of internal custom duties, promote economic unity. Which sequence is correct according to NCERT? Monarchy, citizens, nation. Monarchy, transfer of sovereignty to citizen as nation. Yeah, that will be the correct answer, C. Before 1789, France was ruled by absolute monarch. French Revolution, sovereignty was transferred from the monarchy. After the revolution, citizen became the nation and the source of sovereignty. The political and constitutional changes that came in the wake of French Revolution led to the transfer of sovereignty from the monarchy to a body of French citizens. Which of the following measures were taken by French revolutionaries to create a sense of collective identity? Adoption of the tricolor flag, renaming Estates General as National Assembly, introduction of uniform laws, promotion of French as a common language, abolition of internal customs duties. Which of the following measures were taken by French revolutionaries to create a sense of collective identity? Adoption of tricolor flag is correct. Renaming Estates General as National Assembly is correct. Introduction of uniform laws is correct. Promotion of French as a common language is correct. Abolition of internal customs duties is also correct. All are correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the answer. D is the answer. Yes. One word revision questions. Le patrie means the fatherland. Les citoyens means the citizens. The national flag adopted by revolutionaries was the tricolor. That's it. Estates General was renamed as the National Assembly. Sovereignty was transferred from the monarchy to peoples and people. Internal custom duties were abolished. Uniform system of weights and measures was introduced. French as spoken and written in dash became the common language. Paris became the common language. The people constitute the nation. France aimed to liberate Europe from France aimed to liberate Europe from France aimed to liberate Europe from monarchy. Maybe that will be the liberate Europe from monarchy. Yes. Or despotism. That will be the right word. Answers, please. Le patrie fatherland, les citoyen citizen. The national flag adopted by revolutionaries was the tricolor. Estates General was renamed the National Assembly. Sovereignty was transferred from the monarchy to French citizen. Internal custom duties were abolished. A uniform set of weights and measures introduced. French as spoken and written in Paris became the common language. The people constitute the nation. France aimed to liberate Europe from despotism. Yes. NCERT keywords to memorize. 1789, sovereignty, nation, le patrie, les citoyens, tricolor, National Assembly, uniform laws, weights and measures, despotism. Okay. Now coming to the balance of this chapter, that is Napoleonic Code or Civil Code. There was one paragraph that was not described here. That is about Jacobins Club. Explanation of the paragraph. After the French Revolution in 1789, the ideas of liberty, equality, and nationalism spread beyond France. What happened? News of the revolution reached different parts of the Europe. Students, educated middle class people were inspired by these revolutionary ideas. They started forming Jacobin clubs, political groups that supported revolutionary ideas. Role of Jacobin clubs: they spread the ideas of nationalism, liberty, equality, popular sovereignty. Power belongs to the people. French armies spread nationalism. In the 1790s, French armies entered Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and much of Italy. With the outbreak of revolutionary wars, the French armies carried the idea of nationalism abroad. Easy NCERT flow. French Revolution 1789. News spread across Europe. Students and educated middle class formed Jacobin clubs. French armies moved into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and Italy. Nationalism spread throughout Europe. The map shows Europe after 1815. Important regions visible are in this map. It is more visible in NCERT. I hope so. The Europe after the Congress of Vienna in 1815. Here you can see France here, Switzerland here, and the map shows important regions such as France, Switzerland, and where is the Great Britain? There is no Great Britain. At that time, Britain was not unified. Britain was no unified in, I hope, I think 1801. Yes, 1801. That's why Kingdom of Two Sicilies, Sardinia, that all were not that are shown as separated. Another is Austria. Austria was important. Prussia was important, and Ottoman Empire, Russian Empire here, Ottoman Empire here, and many small German states, Italian regions like Sardinia, Kingdom of Two Italy, etc. So Sardinia and the Kingdom of Two Sicilies were regions of Italy. Italy unification was not happened at that time. Why is map important? Europe was not yet divided into modern nation states. Okay. For example, Germany was divided into many states, Italy was divided into many states, Austria ruled over many different nationalities, Ottoman Empire controlled many Balkan peoples. Because of this, ideas of nationalism spread by the French Revolution later inspired German unification, Italian unification, nationalist movements across Europe. How did the French Revolution spread nationalism in Europe? News of the revolution inspired educated Europeans. Jacobin clubs were formed in many cities. French armies entered Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and Italy. Revolutionary was carried nationalist ideas abroad, and these ideas later inspired nationalist movements throughout Europe. This is break time. We will take a short break of 10 minutes. Take the time to fresh, relax, do some stretching, and drink some water. Welcome back, everyone. Give some MCQs. MCQs. Who began setting up Jacobin clubs in different cities of Europe? Students and educated middle class. Students and educated middle class began setting up Jacobin clubs after hearing about the events in France. The activities and campaigns of Jacobin clubs prepared the way for French armies. I hope so. The activities and campaigns of Jacobin club prepared the way for the French armies, which moved into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and much of Italy in the 1790s. In which decade did the French armies move into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and much of Italy? It was in 1790s. Hope so. Correct. Yes. The French armies moved into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and much of Italy during the 1790s. With the outbreak of the Revolutionary War, the French armies began to carry feudalism abroad, monarchy abroad, the idea of nationalism abroad, industrialization abroad. The idea of nationalism abroad. The news of events in France reached the cities of Europe through The news of events in France reached the cities of Europe through students and educated middle class. Hope so. The news of events in France inspired students and educated middle classes who then began setting up Jacobin clubs across Europe. The Jacobin clubs were set up mainly to spread revolutionary ideas from France. B. The Jacobin clubs were set up mainly to spread the revolutionary ideas of France, especially liberty, equality, fraternity, and nationalism. Which of the following countries was not mentioned as a region into which French armies moved in the 1790s? Spain. They moved to Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, but they doesn't move to Spain. According to NCRT passage, French armies moved into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and much of Italy. Spain is not mentioned in this paragraph. The activities and campaigns of Jacobins Club helped prepare the way for the spread of feudalism, the spread of nationalism in Europe, the restoration of monarchies, the decline of revolutionary ideas. The spread of nationalism in Europe. The activities and campaigns of the Jacobin clubs helped prepare the way for the spread of nationalism in Europe. French Revolution 1789, news spread across Europe, students and educated middle class from Jacobin clubs, French armies moved into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland and Italy in 1790s, and idea of nationalism spread across Europe. Students and educated middle class set up Jacobins club in Europe. They were inspired by the news of events in revolutionary France. It is true, they were inspired by the news events in revolutionary France. A will be the right answer. Hope so. Students and educated middle classes set up Jacobin clubs. Reason, they were inspired by the events of the French Revolution. The reason directly explains why Jacobin clubs were formed across Europe. What did the French armies carry abroad during the revolutionary wars? What did the French armies carry abroad during the revolutionary wars? Feudal privileges, absolute monarchy, the idea of nationalism, the authority of the church. Idea of nationalism. During the revolutionary wars, the French armies carried the idea of nationalism abroad, spreading revolutionary ideals to many parts of Europe. In which country did the French Revolution take place? France. The French Revolution began in France in 1789 and became the first clear expression of nationalism, who were mainly inspired by the events in France, students and educated middle class. They were inspired by the events in revolutionary France and began setting up Jacobin clubs throughout Europe. The activities and campaigns of Jacobins club prepared the way for French armies. NCRT states the activities and campaigns of the Jacobin clubs prepared the way for the French armies, which moved into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and much of Italy in 1790s. The French armies moved into all of the following except they moved to Holland, they moved to Belgium, they moved to Switzerland, but they doesn't move to Russia. According to the NCRT paragraph, French armies moved to Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, much of Italy, which is not mentioned. The spread of nationalism in Europe was helped by Jacobin clubs, revolutionary wars, French armies, feudal privileges, no feudal privileges. Feudal privileges is related to kings. So 1, 2 and 3 will be the answer. The spread of nationalism in Europe was helped by Jacobin clubs, revolutionary wars and French armies. French armies helped spread nationalism in Europe. French armies helped spread nationalism in Europe. That is true. During revolutionary wars, French armies carried the idea of nationalism abroad. Yes, both A and R are true and R is the correct explanation of A. Assertion: French armies helped spread nationalism in Europe, and during revolutionary wars, French armies carried the idea of nationalism abroad. The reason directly explains how French armies spread nationalism. The news of events in France reached the cities of Europe. The dash and educated middle class began setting up Jacobin clubs. Students, the activities of Jacobin clubs prepared the way for French armies. The French armies moved into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland and much of Italy. These movements took place in the 1790s. With the outbreak of revolutionary wars, French armies carried the idea of nationalism abroad. The correct sequence is French Revolution was in 1789, Jacobin clubs in 1790, and French armies, nationalism in Europe. I hope C will be the answer. Yes. French Revolution, then Jacobins club in 1790s, then French armies moved and nationalism in Europe spread. French Revolution was in 1789, news spread across Europe, student and educated middle class formed Jacobin clubs. Activities of Jacobin clubs prepared the way for French armies. French armies entered Holland, Belgium, Switzerland and Italy in 1790s. French armies carried the idea of nationalism abroad. Nationalism spread across Europe. This is the timeline. How did the French Revolution spread nationalism in Europe? News of the French Revolution spread across Europe. Students and educated middle class formed Jacobin clubs. Jacobin clubs propagated revolutionary ideas. French armies moved into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland and much of Italy during the 1790s. During the Revolutionary Wars, French armies carried the idea of nationalism abroad. French Revolution, Jacobin clubs, French armies, nationalism in Europe. Now we have to study about the Napoleonic Code or Civil Code of 1804. Napoleon and the spread of revolutionary ideas. Complete explanation. What did Napoleon do after conquering large parts of Europe? Napoleon introduced many reforms that had already been introduced in France. Although he retained some revolutionary principles, destroyed democracy in France by returning to monarchy. He still made administration more rational and efficient. Napoleonic Code, that means he retained some revolutionary principles, that is true, but he destroyed democracy in France by returning to monarchy. He still made administration more rational and efficient. That is the most important point. Napoleonic Code or Civil Code of 1804. What was it? The Civil Code of 1804, also called the Napoleonic Code, was the Napoleon's most important reform. Main features: abolished privileges based on birth. Before, nobles had special privileges. After this abolition of privileges based on birth, everyone became equal before the law. Then equality before the law, that is, all citizens were treated equally by courts. Right to property. People's property rights were protected. Where was the Napoleonic Code introduced? The code was exported to regions under French control such as Dutch Republic, Switzerland, Italy and Germany. Other reforms introduced by Napoleon. Administrative reforms simplified the administrative divisions, made government more efficient. End of feudalism, that is, abolished the feudal system, freed peasants from serfdom and manorial dues. Urban reforms removed guild restrictions, that is, guilds. What are guilds? Associations that controlled production and trade. Removing guild restrictions increased economic freedom, helped business grow. Improvements in transport and communication. Napoleon improved transport system, improved communication systems. Result, easier movement of goods and people. Who benefited? Peasants benefited. How? They were freed from serfdom. Artisans got more economic freedom. Workers benefited from reforms. Businessmen benefited the most because businessmen liked uniform laws, standardized weights and measures, common national currency. These helped easy movement of goods, easy movement of capital, and expansion of trade. Planting the Tree of Liberty in Germany. The picture is a German artist's criticism of French rule. What is happening? The picture is a German artist criticism of French rule. Which is the picture? This is the picture. The picture is a German artist criticism of French rule. What is happening? French soldiers are occupying a German town. The German town's name is Zweibrücken. Zweibrücken. Soldiers are forcing local people to accept the Tree of Liberty. A peasant is being forced to kneel. Women are harassed. Why is the artist criticizing the French? The French claimed they were bringing liberty, equality, and freedom, but the artist showed oppression, military force, humiliation of local people. Import NCRT point. The inscription says, "Take freedom and equality from us, the model of humanity." This is sarcastic, meaning the French claimed to be liberators. Many Europeans saw them as occupiers and oppressors. Napoleonic Code in 1804, the reform and their effect. Equality before law, abolition of privileges, end of birth-based advantages, right to property, protected ownership, end of feudalism, freed peasants, removal of guild restrictions, given economic freedom, better transport and communication provide easier trade, standard weights and measures provide uniform trade, common currency lead to easier exchange of goods and capitals. One line exam answer. How did Napoleon contribute to nationalism in Europe? Introduced to the Napoleonic Code 1804. This is also called Civil Code of 1804. Abolished privileges based on birth. Established equality before law. Protected the right to property. Abolished feudalism and serfdom. Removed guild restrictions. Improved transport and communication. Promoted uniform laws, weights and measures, and common currency, helping economic integration and nationalism. Need MCQs from this chapter. Great. Let's revise the Napoleon and Napoleonic Code section with exam oriented MCQs. The Civil Code of 1804 is commonly known as Napoleonic Code. The Civil Code of 1804, usually known as the Napoleonic Code, was Napoleon's most important reform. According to Napoleonic Code, which of the following was abolished? Equality before law was introduced, right to property was introduced, privileges based on birth was abolished, uniform laws was also introduced. So answer is C. Privileges based on birth. Napoleonic Code abolished privileges based on birth, established equality before law, and secured the right to property. Which principle was established by the Napoleonic Code? Equality before law, privileges of nobles, no. Rule of guilds, no. Serfdom, no. Equality before law was established by Napoleonic Code. The Napoleonic Code secured the right to property. The Napoleonic Code secured the right to property, protecting citizens' ownership rights. The Napoleonic Code was exported to all of the following regions except Switzerland, Italy, Germany, Russia. The Russia is the answer. Hope so. Yes. According to NCERT, the Napoleonic Code was exported to Dutch Republic, Switzerland, Italy, and Germany. We can just read one time NCERT about Napoleonic Code. Within the wide swath of territory that came under his control, Napoleon set about introducing many of the reforms that he had already introduced in France. Through a return to monarchy, Napoleon had no doubt destroyed democracy in France. He destroyed democracy in France, but in the administrative field, he had incorporated revolutionary principles in order to make the whole system more rational and efficient. The Civil Code of 1804, usually known as the Napoleonic Code, did away with all privileges based on birth, established equality before law, and secured right to property. This code was exported to the regions under French control. In the Dutch Republic, in Switzerland, in Italy, and Germany, Napoleon simplified the administrative divisions, abolished the feudal system, and freed peasants from serfdom and manorial dues. In the towns too, guild restrictions were removed. Transport and communication system were improved. Peasants, artisans, workers, and new businessmen enjoyed a few found freedom. Businessmen and small-scale producers of goods in particular began to realize that uniform laws, standardized weights and measures, and a common national currency would facilitate the movement and exchange of goods and capital from one region to another. According to NCERT, the Napoleonic Code was exported to Dutch Republic, Switzerland, Italy, and Germany. Russia is not mentioned. Then Napoleon simplified administrative divisions, abolished the feudal system, and freed the peasants from serfdom and manorial dues. What restrictions were removed in towns under Napoleon's rule? Guild restrictions. Napoleon removed guild restrictions in town. What were guilds? Guilds were associations of craftsmen and traders that controlled production, prices, and trade. Why these guild restrictions were there? Because the monarchy or king feared that if people build guild or they form associations, they may turn conspiracy against them. They may turn negatives. They will say their negatives and point out the mistakes of kings and rulers. So guild restrictions were there. But Napoleon removed that guild restrictions. Effect of removing guild restrictions: more economic freedom, easier trade and business, growth of industries. Here guild are shown as the association of craftsmen and traders. So the craftsmen and traders were not allowed to form association to say about the production, price, trade, etc. But after the time of Napoleon, after Napoleon came to rule France, guild restrictions were removed as part of the Napoleonic Code 1804. Effect of removing guild restrictions: more economic freedom, easier trade and business, growth of industries. Who benefited the most from Napoleon's administrative reforms? Businessmen and small-scale producers. According to NCERT, businessmen and small producers of goods benefited from uniform laws, standardized weights and measures, a common national currency, improved transport and communication. These reforms made the movement of goods and capital much easier. Why did businessmen welcome Napoleon's reforms? Because trade became easier due to uniform laws and common currency. Businessmen welcomed Napoleon's reforms because uniform laws reduced confusion, standardized weights and measures made trade easier, a common currency facilitated transactions, improved transport and communication helped move goods and capital. Which of the following was not a feature of Napoleonic Code? Equality before law, it is a feature. Right to property, also a feature. Privilege based on birth, no. Privileges based on birth were abolished. Abolition of birth-based privileges, that is a feature. So C is the answer. Privileges based on birth. The Napoleonic Code actually abolished privileges based on birth. Features of Napoleonic Code 1804. Equality before the law, abolition of birth-based privileges, right to property. Privileges based on birth was not a property of Napoleonic Code. Which of the following reforms helped improve the movement and exchange of goods and capitals? Feudal dues. Feudal dues were avoided. Guild restrictions were removed. Uniform laws, standardized weights and measures, and a common currency. C. Uniform laws, standardized weights and measures, and a common currency. These reforms made trade simpler and more efficient, facilitated the movement of goods and capital, benefited businessmen and small producers. Napoleon introduced many reforms that made administration more rational and efficient. He simplified administrative divisions and abolished the feudal system. Both A and R are true. Napoleon introduced many reforms that made administration more rational and efficient. That is true. He simplified administrative divisions and abolished the feudal system. That is also true. Both A and R are true. But R does not explain A. No. Due to R, A is correct. So A will be the right answer. Assertion: Napoleon introduced reforms that made administration more rational and efficient. Reason: he simplified administrative divisions and abolished the feudal system. These reforms directly contributed to a more efficient administration. Even though Napoleon introduced many reforms, he had established democracy throughout Europe, returned to monarchy and destroyed democracy in France, abolished all armies, restored feudal privileges. Returned to monarchy and destroyed democracy in France. Napoleon is a mixed figure in history, introduced many revolutionary reforms, Napoleonic Code, equality before law, right to property, abolition of feudalism, but destroyed democracy in France, returned to monarchy, became emperor. This is a favorite CBSE MCQ area. The Civil Code of 1804 was exported to Dutch Republic, Switzerland, Italy, Germany. Dutch Republic is correct, Switzerland is also correct, Italy is also correct, Germany is also correct. Hope so. Italy, Germany, Switzerland, Dutch Republic. True. 1, 2, 3 and 4. D. Which of the following reforms introduced by Napoleon benefited peasants? Abolition of serfdom and manorial dues. That helped or benefited peasants. Abolition of serfdom and manorial dues. Explanation. Napoleon's reforms benefited peasants because he abolished serfdom, abolished manorial dues, and ended many feudal obligations. This gave peasants greater freedom and reduced their burdens. The picture planting the tree of liberty was meant to show the picture planting the tree of liberty was meant to show oh, this figure. The French soldiers peacefully welcomed everywhere. No. Criticism of French occupation by a German artist. Support of feudal privileges. No. Celebration of monarchy. I think criticism of French occupation by a German artist. It was against French occupation. Yes, criticism of French occupation by French artists. This picture, planting the tree of liberty, was drawn by German artists to criticize French rule. Although the French claimed they were bringing liberty, equality, freedom, the artist showed French soldiers forcing people to accept French rule, a peasant being made to kneel, local people being humiliated. The message was that many Europeans saw the French not as liberators but as occupiers. The inscription in the picture, "Take freedom and equality from us, the model of humanity." A genuine praise of French rule, a sarcastic criticism of French rule, prayer by peasants, a declaration by Napoleon. We had read earlier that it is a sarcastic criticism of French rule. The explanation, inscription, "Take freedom and equality from us, the model of humanity," was meant sarcastically. The artist was criticizing the contradiction between French claim, that is liberty, equality and freedom. Reality shown in the picture, military occupation, forced obedience, humiliation of local people. Which one of the following was a major economic reform introduced by Napoleon? Restoration of guild restrictions, standardized weights and measures, return of feudal dues, privileges for nobles. The major economic reform introduced by Napoleon was standardized weights and measures. Balance all or opposites of the measures that he taken. Napoleon introduced several economic reforms that benefited trade and business. From that, the important one is standardized weights and measures, uniform laws, common national currency, removal of guild restrictions, improved transport and communications. These reforms made the movement and exchange of goods and capital much easier. Business welcomed Napoleon's rule. Napoleon introduced uniform laws, standardized weights and measures, and a common currency. Yes, both A and R are true, and R is the correct explanation of A. MCQ 20. Which of the following reforms introduced by Napoleon are correctly matched? Napoleonic Code, by equality of law, abolition of serfdom, freedom for peasants, removal of guild restrictions, economic freedom, standardized weights and measures, easier trade. Both, all are correct. D. Final NCRT one word revision. Civil Code of 1804, also known as Napoleonic Code, privileges based on birth were abolished, equality before law was established, right to property was secured, peasants were freed from serfdom and manorial dues, guild restrictions were removed, uniform weights and measures were introduced, a common national currency facilitated trade. The picture, Planting the Tree of Liberty, criticizes the French occupation. Napoleon destroyed democracy in France and returned to monarchy. What were the main features of the Napoleonic Code? Abolished privileges based on birth, established equality before law, secured the right to property. How did Napoleon reform Europe? Introduced a Napoleonic Code, abolished feudalism, freed peasants from serfdom and manorial dues, removed guild restrictions, introduced uniform laws, weights and measures, and a common currency. Why did businessmen welcome Napoleon's rule? Due to uniform laws, standardized weights and measures, common currency, and easier movement of goods and capital. Master flow of the chapter so far. French Revolution, 1789. People become source of sovereignty. Okay, sovereignty was transferred from the hands of monarchy to the people. Jacobin clubs spread revolutionary ideas. Okay, the Jacobin clubs were formed by students and educated people. French army spread nationalism. Napoleon rises. Napoleonic Code 1804 came. Equality before law plus end of feudalism was done. Nationalist ideas spread across Europe and later inspires Germany, Italy, and Greece nationalist movements. You have now thoroughly revised the French Revolution, Jacobin clubs, French armies, Napoleon portion of nationalism in Europe. Now we can discuss some of the previous year questions. Some previous questions. Describe the steps taken by the French revolutionaries to create a sense of collective identity among the French people. The political and constitutional changes that came in the wake of the French Revolution led to the transfer of sovereignty from monarchy to a body of French citizens. Explain. How did the French Revolution spread the spirit of nationalism in Europe? Explain with the suitable arguments. What changes did the French Revolution bring in the political system of France? Explain the significance of the ideas of le patrie and le citoyen. How did the French revolutionaries create a sense of national unity among the French people? What was the Napoleonic Code? Mention any three of its features. Abolished privileges based on birth, established equality before law, secured right to property. How did Napoleon reform the administrative system in the territories under his control? Simplified administrative divisions, abolished feudalism, freed peasants from serfdom and manorial dues, removed guild restrictions, introduced uniform laws. How did businessmen and small producers welcome Napoleon's rule? Uniform laws, standardized weights and measures, common currency, easier movement of goods and capitals. How did the French armies spread nationalism in Europe? Jacobin clubs spread revolutionary ideas. French armies moved into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and Italy. Revolutionary wars carried nationalism abroad. Very important MCQs asked and re-asked. The Civil Code of 1804 is also known as Napoleonic Code. Le patrie means fatherland. Estate General was renamed as National Assembly, which principle was established by the Napoleonic Code. Equality before law. 5-mark questions for 2027. How did French Revolution and Napoleon contribute to the growth of nationalism in Europe? Sovereignty transferred from monarchy to citizens. Yes. La patrie, the fatherland. Le citoyen, the citizen, promoted national identity. Tricolor flag and National Assembly created unity. French army spread nationalism abroad. Napoleonic Code established equality before law. Feudalism and serfdom were abolished. Uniform laws and common currency encouraged integration. Key most probable. Five-mark question. With the answers. French Revolution and Napoleon. Describe the steps taken by French revolutionaries to create a sense of collective identity among the French people. This is a question that has been asked a lot of times in the previous year questions. So this is an important question. French revolutionaries took several measures to create a collective identity, introduced the idea of le patrie or fatherland and le citoyen, the citizen, adopted the tricolor flag replacing the royal standard, renamed the Estates General as the National Assembly, composed national hymns, took oaths and commemorated martyrs in the name of the nation, established a centralized administrative system with uniform laws, abolished internal custom duties and introduced uniform weights and measures, promoted French as spoken and written in Paris as the common national language. How did the French Revolution spread the spirit of nationalism in Europe? The French Revolution proclaimed that sovereignty belonged to the people. Revolutionary ideas inspired students and educated middle class across Europe, and they created Jacobin clubs. French armies moved into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and much of Italy. During revolutionary wars, French armies carried the ideas of liberty, equality, and nationalism abroad. These ideas inspired nationalist movement throughout Europe. The political and constitutional changes brought by the French Revolution led to the transfer of sovereignty from monarchy to citizens. Explain. Before 1789, France was ruled by an absolute monarch. The revolution ended the absolute authority of the king. Sovereignty was transferred from the monarchy to a body of French citizens. It declared that people constituted the nation. Citizens became the source of political power. The nation was no longer identified with the king, but its people. What was the Napoleonic Code? Explains main features. The Civil Code of 1804, known as Napoleonic Code, was introduced by Napoleon. It abolished privileges based on birth, established equality before law, secured right to property, introduced uniform laws, became a model for many countries under French control. How did Napoleon reform Europe? Introduced the Napoleonic Code, abolished privileges based on birth, established equality before law, freed peasants from serfdom and manorial dues, removed guild restrictions in town, simplified administrative divisions, and improved transport and communication systems. Why did businessmen and small producers welcome Napoleon's rule? Businessmen welcomed Napoleon's reforms because uniform laws simplified trade, standardized weights and measures reduced confusion, common currency facilitated exchange, improved transport and communication helped business. Goods and capital could move freely from one region to another. How did French armies contribute to the spread of nationalism in Europe? The French armies entered Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and Italy. They carried revolutionary ideas outside France. They spread the concept of liberty, equality, and nationalism. Feudal privileges were challenged. Nationalist ideas inspired people in other European countries. These ideas later contributed to unification movements in Germany and Italy. How did Napoleon contribute to the rise of nationalism in Europe? Introduced the Napoleonic Code, established equality before law, abolished privileges based on birth, ended feudalism and serfdom in many regions, introduced uniform laws, weights and measures, encouraged administrative and economic unity. His reforms inspired nationalist movements across Europe. Super important 7-point answer can be used for making 5-mark questions. French Revolution, nationalism and Napoleon. Sovereignty transferred from monarchy to citizen. Le Patrie and Le Citoyen promoted national identity. Tricolor flag and the National Assembly created unity. Jacobin clubs spread revolutionary ideas. French armies carried nationalism abroad. Napoleonic Code established the equality before law. Feudalism and serfdom were abolished. If you memorize these 7 points, you can answer almost 5-mark questions from the first 6 to 7 pages of chapter. That is right. That is right. First point. What was the first point? Sovereignty was transferred from the monarchy or king to the hands of people. Second, le patrie, that means fatherland, and le citoyen, that means citizen, promoted national identity. And third one, a tricolor flag was introduced instead of the royal flag. Fourth one, National Assembly was named the election assembly was renamed as National Assembly. Jacobin clubs formed by students and educated people spread revolutionary ideas. French armies carried the nationalism abroad. Napoleonic Code established the equality before law. Feudalism and serfdom were abolished as a result of Napoleonic Code. It's break time. Let's take a short break of 10 minutes. Welcome back. This is the final session. This is the last paragraph from that chapter, that also we need to study. Expansion of the paragraph. Benefits of Napoleon's reforms. Many people, especially businessmen and small scale producers, benefited from Napoleon's reforms because uniform laws were introduced, standardized weights and measures were introduced, a common national currency was promoted, movement of goods became easier, exchange of capital became easier. These reforms helped trade and business grow. Mixed reactions to French rule. The reaction of people in conquered territories was mixed. Initially, French armies were welcomed in places like Holland, Switzerland, Brussels, Mainz, Milan, and Warsaw. French armies were welcomed by harbingers of liberty. Welcomed as harbingers of liberty, that is, messengers of freedom. People hoped that French would end feudalism, bring liberty, bring equality. Why did people turn against the French? The initial enthusiasm soon changed into hostility because people realized that political freedom was missing. Administrative reforms were introduced, but political freedom was not given. Problems created by French rule. Increased taxation. People had to pay higher taxes. Censorship. Freedom of speech and expression was restricted. Forced conscription. That is, people were forcibly recruited into French armies. Conscription. Compulsory military service. Many young men were forced to fight in Napoleon's wars. Final result. People felt that high taxes, censorship, forced military service outweighed administrative reforms, economic benefits. Therefore, many Europeans began opposing French rule. NCRT flowchart. French rule arrives. People welcome French armies as liberators. Napoleon introduces reforms, uniform laws, common currency, standard weights. Businessmen benefit. Higher taxes plus censorship plus forced conscription is made. People became hostile to French rule. Most important exam times. Harbingers of liberty. People who bring freedom is called harbingers of liberty. Conscription. Forced recruitment into the army. Censorship. Government control over speech, writing, and publications. That is called censorship. Why did the initial enthusiasm for French rule turn into hostility? French armies were initially welcomed as harbingers of liberty. Administrative reforms did not bring political freedom. Taxes were increased, censorship was imposed, forced conscription into French armies was introduced. Therefore, people began opposing French rule. Why did people in conquered territories become hostile to French rule? Why did people in conquered territories become hostile to French rule? Because equality before law, uniform laws and common currency, increased taxation, censorship and forced conscription. I think C is the answer. Increased taxation, censorship and forced conscription. These were the main reasons why the initial enthusiasm for French rule turned into hostility. Increased taxation, higher burden on people, and censorship, restricted freedom of expression, forced conscription. People were compelled to join Napoleon armies. The French armies were initially welcomed in many places as harbingers of liberty. Explanation. Initially, many people in Holland, Switzerland, Brussels, Mainz, Milan, Warsaw welcomed the French armies as harbingers of liberty, that is, bringers of freedom, hoping they would end feudalism and bring equality. The new administrative arrangements introduced by the French did not go hand in hand with economic reforms, political freedom, trade and commerce, equality before law. Political freedom. The new administrative arrangements did not go in hand with the political freedom. Although Napoleon introduced uniform laws, standardized weights and measures, common currency, better administration, people were unhappy because political freedom was absent, taxes increased, censorship was imposed, and forced conscription was introduced. Which of the following cities was mentioned as a place where French armies were initially welcomed? Berlin, Vienna, Milan, Moscow. I think Milan. C. Yes, according to NCRT, French armies were initially welcomed in Brussels, Mainz, Milan, Warsaw, Holland, and Switzerland because people saw them as harbingers of liberty. Which of the following led to hostility against French rule? Increased taxation, censorship, forced conscription, equality before law. Hostility against French rule. Increased taxation was the reason, censorship was also a reason, forced conscription was also a reason, equality before law was not a reason. So 1, 2, 3 are the most probable answers. C is the answer. Why? The reasons for hostility against French rule were increased taxation, censorship, forced conscription. Equality before law was actually a positive reform introduced by Napoleon, not a reason for hostility. Businessmen welcomed Napoleon's rule. Uniform laws, common currency, and standardized weights and measures made trade easier. I think A will be the answer. Both A and R are true, and R is the correct explanation of A. Businessmen welcomed Napoleon's rule. Uniform laws, common currency, and standardized weights and measures made easier. The reason directly explains why businessmen benefited and supported Napoleon's reforms. Conscription means forced recruitment into the army. Conscription, that is compulsory military service or forced recruitment into the army. NCRT contest. Many Europeans became hostile to French rule because Napoleon increased taxes, imposed censorships, introduced forced conscription, requiring young men to join his armies and fight wars. Why were French armies initially welcomed in many European regions? They were seen as harbingers of liberty. Initially, many Europeans welcomed the French armies because they believed the French would end feudal privileges, bring liberty and equality, introduce modern laws and reforms. Therefore, the French armies were viewed as harbingers of liberty or bringers of freedom. Which of the following groups benefited the most from Napoleon's reforms? Which of the following groups benefited the most from Napoleon's reforms? Businessmen and small-scale producers. Explanation. Businessmen and small-scale producers benefited the most because Napoleon introduced uniform laws, standardized weights and measures, common national currency, better transport and communication. These reforms made trade easier and increased profits. The initial enthusiasm of French rule turned into hostility because the initial enthusiasm for French rule turned into hostility because political freedom was not provided and taxation, censorship and conscription increased. B will be the answer. The political freedom was not provided and taxation, censorship and conscription increased. Initially, French armies were welcomed as harbingers of liberty, but soon people became hostile because political freedom was not granted, taxes were increased, censorship was imposed, forced conscription into French armies was introduced. As a result, many Europeans began opposing French rule despite its administrative and economic reforms. Benefits of French rule: uniform laws, standardized weights and measures, common currency, easier trade, easier movement of goods and capitals. Reasons of hostility: increased taxation, censorship, forced conscription, lack of political freedom. Key terms: harbingers of liberty, that means bringers of freedom, conscription, forced recruitment into the army, censorship, government control over speech and publications. Why did the initial enthusiasm for French rule turn into hostility? Answer. French armies were initially welcomed as harbingers of liberty. New administrative arrangements did not provide political freedom. Taxes were increased. Censorship was imposed. Forced conscription into French armies was introduced. Therefore, many Europeans turned against French rule. Which one of the following was not a reason for the hostility against French rule? Increased taxation, censorship, forced conscription, uniform laws. Uniform laws. Reasons for hostility against French rule was increased taxation, censorship, forced conscription, lack of political freedom. Uniform laws were actually a beneficial reform, so they were not a reason for hostility. French rule was welcomed by many Europeans at first. People believed the French would bring liberty and end feudal privileges. French rule was welcomed by many Europeans at first. That is true. People believed that French would bring liberty and end feudal privileges. A. Assertion is correct. Reason is the correct explanation of A. Final memory sheet. Initially welcomed because liberty, equality, end of feudalism, modern reforms. But later opposed because increased taxation, censorship, forced conscription and no political freedom. Places mentioned in NCERT is Holland, Switzerland, Brussels, Mainz, Milan and Warsaw. Key terms: harbingers of liberty, bringers of freedom. Conscription, forced military service. Censorship, control over speech or publications. Which sequence correctly describes people's reaction to French rule? Welcome as harbingers of liberty, reforms, hostility due to taxes, censorship and conscription. B. Correct sequence: French armies arrived, welcomed as harbingers of liberty, Napoleon introduces reforms, that is uniform laws, common currency, abolition of feudalism. People realize political freedom is absent. Taxes increase, censorship imposed and conscription introduced. Hostility towards French rule grows. Master revision table, French Napoleon, French Revolution, Napoleon. French Revolution in 1789. First clear expression of nationalism came from this French Revolution in 1789. Sovereignty transferred from monarchy to citizens. Le patrie means fatherland. Le citoyen means citizen. Tricolor replaced royal standard flag. National Assembly was the new name of a state general. Jacobins Club spread revolutionary ideas. French armies spread nationalism abroad. Napoleonic Code 1804, equality before law. Privileges based on birth were abolished. Right to property was secured. Serfdom and manorial dues were abolished. Guild restrictions were removed. Common currency facilitated trade. Harbingers of liberty because they were initial view of French armies. Conscription, forced recruitment into army. Censorship, restriction on speech and publications. Hostility to French rule. Taxes plus censorship plus conscription. From the portion you have revised the top three three most probable 5-mark questions are: describe the steps taken by French revolutionaries to create a sense of collective identity among the French people. How did the French Revolution spread nationalism in Europe? What was Napoleonic Code? Explain its features and impact. Step taken by French revolutionaries to create collective identity. 5-mark question. Then you have to write this much points and their explanation. First one is Le patrie means fatherland, Le citoyen means citizen. Tricolor flag was adopted. The state general was replaced by National Assembly. National hymns, oaths and martyrs were commemorated in the name of national unity. Uniform laws were introduced. Internal custom duties were abolished. Uniform weights and measures were introduced. French made common national language. Regional dialects were removed. How did the French Revolution spread idea of nationalism in Europe? Sovereignty transferred from monarchy to citizens, or the power of hands of people. Revolutionary ideas spread across Europe. Jacobin clubs were established. French armies entered many European regions. Nationalism carried abroad through revolutionary wars inspired nationalist movement in Europe. Features of Napoleonic Code. Civil Code of 1804 abolished birth-based privileges, equality before law, right to property secured, uniform laws was introduced. How did Napoleon reform Europe? Introduced Napoleonic Code, abolished feudalism, freed peasants from serfdom, removed guild restrictions, simplified administration, improved transport and communication, introduced uniform laws. Why did businessmen become Napoleon's rule? Businessmen welcome Napoleon's rule. Uniform laws, standardized weights and measures, common currency, easier movements of good, easier movement of capital. Why did people become hostile to French rule? No political freedom, increased taxation, censorship imposed, forced conscription, reforms outweighed by hardships. How did French armies spread nationalism? Entered Holland, Belgium, Switzerland and Italy, spread revolutionary ideas, spread liberty and equality, challenged feudalism, inspired nationalism. How did Napoleon contribute to nationalism? Napoleonic Code was introduced, equality before law, end of birth privileges, end of feudalism, uniform laws, common currency, inspired nationalist movements. French Revolution, sovereignty transferred to citizens, collective identity, Le patrie plus Le citoyen plus tricolor plus National Assembly, Jacobin clubs spread revolutionary ideas, French armies spread nationalism, Napoleonic Code, equality plus property plus no birth privileges, benefits, uniform laws plus currency plus weights and measures, hostility, taxes plus censorship plus conscription plus no political freedom. Definitions: La patrie, fatherland; Le citoyen, citizen; conscription, forced army service; censorship, restriction on speech or publications; harbingers of liberty, bringers of freedom. However, in the areas conquered, the reactions of the local population to French rule were mixed. Initially, in many places such as Holland and Switzerland, as well as in certain cities like Brussels, Mainz, Milan, and Warsaw, the French armies were welcomed as harbingers of liberty. But the initial enthusiasm soon turned to hostility as it became clear that new administrative arrangements did not go in hand with political freedom. Increased taxation, censorship, forced conscription into the French armies required to conquer the rest of Europe all seemed to outweigh the advantage of the administrative changes. And there is a figure also. In this figure, the courier of Rhineland loses all that he has on his way home from Leipzig. The Napoleon here is represented as a postman on his way back to France after he lost the Battle of Leipzig in 1830. Each letter dropping out of his bag bears the names of the territories he lost. So this all represents the name of territories that Napoleon lost. And this postman is represented as a Napoleon. He is going back to France after he lost the Battle of Leipzig in 1813. Now we can come to the next chapter, that is the making of nationalism in Europe. First we can go through ChatGPT. The making of nationalism in Europe. NCRT explanations. The making of nationalism in Europe. Introduction. This page explains what Europe looked like before nationalism emerged. Europe had no nation states. In the mid 18th century, countries like Germany, Italy, and Switzerland did not exist as unified nations. Instead, Europe was divided into kingdom, duchies, cantons, small independent territories. Each territory had its own ruler. The people did not share a common national identity. People living in the same empire often spoke different languages, followed different cultures, belonged to different ethnic groups. Therefore, they did not think of themselves as belonging to one nation. Example: the Habsburg Empire, Austria Hungary. The Habsburg Empire was a large empire containing many different peoples. It included Tyrol, Austria, Sudetenland, German speaking aristocracy, and Lombardy and Venetia, that is Italian speaking provinces. Hungary is Magyar speaking people, Galicia, Polish speaking aristocracy, Bohemians and Slovaks, Slovenes, Croats, Romanians. So the empire was a patchwork of different regions, languages, and cultures. Why was political unity difficult? Because people were not so different in language and culture, it was hard to create a sense of unity. The only thing connecting them was loyalty, that is, allegiance to the emperor. They were subjects of the emperor rather than the citizens of a nation. Exam keywords: nation state, autocratic monarchy, Habsburg Empire, collective identity, political unity, allegiance to the emperor. Why was the Habsburg Empire called a patchwork of many different regions and peoples? It contained many ethnic groups such as German, Italians, Magyars, Poles, Slovaks, Croats, and Romanians. People spoke different languages and followed different cultures. The only common bond among them was loyalty to the emperor. Before the rise of nationalism, Germany and Italy were divided into let's read NCRT. After reading NCRT, we can do the questions. If you look at the map of mid 18th century Europe, you will find that there were no nation state as we know them today. What we know today is as Germany, Italy, Switzerland were divided into kingdoms, duchies, cantons, whose rulers had their autonomous territories. Eastern and Central Europe were under autocratic monarchies within the territories of which lived diverse peoples. They did not see themselves as sharing a collective identity or a common culture. Often, they even spoke different languages and belonged to different ethnic groups. The Habsburg Empire that ruled over Austria-Hungary, for example, was a patchwork of many different regions and peoples. It included the Alpine regions, that is Tyrol, Austria and Sudetenland, as well as Bohemia, where the aristocracy was predominantly German speaking. It also included Italian speaking provinces of Lombardy and Venetia. In Hungary, half of the population speak Magyar, while the other half spoke a variety of dialects. In Galicia, the aristocracy spoke Polish. Besides these three dominant groups, there also lived within the boundaries of the empire a mass of subject peasant peoples, Bohemians and Slovaks to the north, Slovenes in Carniola, Croats to the south, Romans to the east of Transylvania. Such differences did not easily promote a sense of political unity. The only tie binding these diverse groups together was a common allegiance to the emperor. In this paragraph, not that much questions has been asked, but it is also important. So we can try to do some of the MCQs. Not sure whether it can be right. Before the rise of nationalism, Germany and Italy were divided into kingdoms, duchies and cantons. The only factor that bound the diverse groups of Habsburg Empire together was common allegiance to the emperor. The people of Habsburg Empire spoke different languages and belonged to different ethnic groups. The only common bond among them was their allegiance to the emperor. Which of the following regions of the Habsburg Empire had an Italian speaking population? The Italian speaking population was Lombardy and Venetia. Lombardy and Venetia were the Italian speaking provinces included in the Habsburg Empire. In Hungary, about half of the population spoke Magyar. Yes, Magyar. The aristocracy in Galicia mainly spoke Polish. Yes. Galicia was inhabited mainly by Polish-speaking people, and the aristocracy there also spoke Polish. Which of the following statement is true about Europe in the mid-18th century? Germany and Italy were already unified nation-states. Europe was dominated by democratic republics. There were no nation-state as we know them today. Every state had a common language and a culture. No, every state had different language and culture. Germany and Italy were already unified. No, they were not unified. Europe was dominated by democratic republics. No, they were dominated by monarchs. There were no nation state as we know them today. That is right. See. Before the rise of nationalism, Europe was divided into the questions were not visible. First question was before the rise of nationalism, Germany and Italy were divided into kingdoms, duchies, and cantons. The only factor that bound the diverse groups of the Habsburg Empire was common allegiance to the emperor. Which among the following regions of the Habsburg Empire had an Italian-speaking population, that is Lombardy and Venetia? Hungary, about half of the population speak Magyar, and other half spoke dialects. The aristocracy in Galicia mainly spoke Polish. Which of the following statement is true about Europe in the mid-18th century? There were no nation-state as we know them today. Habsburg Empire was ruled by The Habsburg Empire was ruled by a democratic government, an autocratic monarchy, a federal republic, a constitutional monarchy. The Habsburg Empire was ruled by an autocratic monarchy. Yes, the Habsburg Empire was ruled by an autocratic monarchy, meaning the emperor held most of the political power and people had little say in governance. Which of the following groups was not mentioned as part of the Habsburg Empire? Which of the following groups was not mentioned as part of the Habsburg Empire? Croats, Romanians, French, Slovenes. Croats was there, Romanians, French, Slovenes. Bohemians, Slovaks to the north, Slovaks were there, Slovenes were there, Croats were there, Romans were there, Croats were there, Slovenes were there. I think it is French. The French were not part of the Habsburg Empire as described in NCERT test. The empire included Germans, Italians, Magyars, Poles, Slovaks, Slovenes, Croats, Romanians, and others. In text it is given as Romans. The term nation state refers to a state where people share common identity, history, and culture. A nation state is a state where most people share a common identity, history, culture, and often language. Nationalism aimed to create such states in Europe. According to the NCRT, what was the most important common bond among the diverse peoples of the Habsburg Empire? According to NCRT, what was the most important common bond among the diverse peoples of the Habsburg Empire? Loyalty to the emperor. Hope so. The Habsburg Empire contained many different linguistic and ethnic groups. They did not share a common language, culture, or religion. The main factor uniting them was loyalty or allegiance to the Habsburg Emperor. Which among the following was a German speaking region in the Habsburg Empire? German speaking. Tyrol. Tyrol. The Tyrol was one of the German speaking regions of the Habsburg Empire. The German speaking aristocracy was concentrated in regions such as Tyrol, Austria, and Sudetenland. Which of the following pairs is correctly matched? Hungary, Italian speaking population. No. Galicia, Polish speaking aristocracy. Yes. Lombardy. No. Lombardy and Venetia spoke Italy. Bohemia, German speaking. So correct answer is Galicia. That is Poland, Polish speaking. The other options are incorrect because Hungary mainly Magyar speaking, not Italian. Lombardy Italian speaking, not Magyar. Bohemia inhabited by Czechs and Bohemians, not Italian. Which statement best describes the Habsburg Empire? It was a nation state with one language and one culture. It was a democratic, no. It was a collection of diverse regions and peoples under one emperor. C is the answer. The Habsburg Empire was not a nation state, it was a vast empire made up of many different ethnic groups, languages, and cultures, all ruled by a single emperor. Why was it difficult to create a collective identity in the Habsburg Empire? People belonged to different ethnic groups and spoke different languages. It was difficult to create a collective identity because the Habsburg Empire contained many different ethnic groups, languages, and cultures. People identified more with their local region and community than with a common nation. Before nationalism emerged in Europe, people's loyalty was generally towards the emperor or ruling dynasty. Which of the following developments led to the emergence of nation states in Europe? Rise of nationalism among people sharing a common identity. The rise of nationalism encouraged people with a common language, history, culture, and tradition to seek political unity. This led to the creation of modern nation states such as Germany and Italy. What was the main difference between a dynastic empire and a nation state? Dynastic empires were larger in size. Nation states were ruled by emperors. Dynastic empires were based on a loyalty to a ruler. while nation state were based on shared national identity. C is the answer. Dynastic empire and nation state. Dynastic empire based on loyalty to a ruler, king, or emperor. Nation state based on shared national identity. Contains many ethnic groups and languages. People share common culture, history, and identity. Subjects obey the ruler. Citizens belong to the nation. Example: Habsburg Empire, Dynastic Empire, Germany after unification to a nation state. According to NCERT, which of the following was not a characteristic of Habsburg Empire? Which was not a characteristic of the Habsburg Empire? Diverse ethnic groups, it is a characteristic. Different languages and cultures, that is also a characteristic. Common national identity among people, no, that is not a characteristics. Ruled by an autocratic emperor, yes, it is a characteristics. See. Which of the following best explains why nationalism became a powerful force in Europe during the 19th century? People wanted to strengthen dynastic empires. People wanted political unity based on shared culture, language, and history. People wanted more feudal privileges. People wanted Europe to remain divided into small states. People wanted political unity based on shared culture, language, and history. Nationalism became a powerful force because people wanted political unity based on a common language, culture, history, and shared identity. This desire led to the unification of countries like Germany and Italy and weakened many old dynastic empires. In the Habsburg Empire, the term allegiance refers to allegiance. Loyalty and obedience to the emperor. That will be the allegiance. Yes. And where is this allegiance present in the chapter? You can see here. Allegiance to the emperor. Allegiance means loyalty, faithfulness, or obedience to a ruler or authority. The Habsburg Empire, people of different languages and cultures were united mainly by their allegiance to the emperor. Score 20 out of 20. Excellent. Quick revision of this page. Europe before nationalism. No nation states like Germany and Italy. Europe was divided into kingdoms, duchies, and empires. Habsburg Empire, ruled by an autocratic emperor, included many ethnic groups and languages. German-speaking regions were Tyrol, Austria, and Sudetenland. Italian-speaking regions were Lombardy and Venetia. Hungary, mainly Magyar-speaking people. Galicia, Polish-speaking aristocracy. Key point: no common national identity. The main bond was allegiance to the emperor. Why was the Habsburg Empire considered a multinational empire? It contained many ethnic groups such as Germans, Italians, Magyars, Poles, Croats, and Romanians. People spoke different languages and followed different cultures. The regions were united under a single Habsburg emperor, the aristocracy and the new middle class. In Europe, the aristocracy referred to next. It's about the next section, that is aristocracy and the new middle class. First, we can read the meaning of each sentences through ChatGPT. Okay, this is the next paragraph that we are going to study, the aristocracy and the new middle class. The aristocracy and the new middle class. This section explains who ruled Europe before nationalism and which social groups spread nationalist ideas. Aristocracy, the dominant class. The aristocracy was the rich land-owning noble class. Features of the aristocracy: owned large estates in the countryside, also had town houses in cities, spoke French in high society and diplomacy. Families were connected through marriages, held most social and political power. Although powerful, they were few in number, only few in number. Majority were peasants. And next, first class was aristocracy, the dominant class. Next one was peasants. Peasants was the majority people. Most Europeans were peasants. In Western Europe, land was cultivated by tenants and small landowners. In Eastern and Central Europe, huge estates were existed. These estates were worked by serfs. Serfs were called the peasants. They are that are tied to the land and under the control of landlords. They have limited freedom. Important term: serf, a peasant who was not free to leave the land of the landlord. Growth of industrialization. In Western and parts of Central Europe, trade increased, industries developed, towns grew. Industrialization began first in England during the second half of the 18th century and later in France and the German state in 19th century. So where does industrialization first began? That is in England during the second half of the 18th century. Emergence of new social groups. Industrialization created new classes like working class and middle class. Who are working class? Working class were factory workers, laborers, and middle class were industrialists, businessmen, professionals. Professionals mainly includes lawyers, teachers, and doctors. Who spread nationalist ideas? The educated liberal middle class became the main supporter of nationalism. They demanded national unity, freedom, end of aristocratic privileges. Nationalism became popular mainly among the educated middle class. NCRT keywords: aristocracy, peasantry, serfs, industrialization, working class, middle class, liberalism, national unity. How did industrialization lead to? So today's session is over. Thank you all for joining my live session. See you tomorrow.